Hello, everyone, and welcome in to an episode of the RTI Recruiting Podcast. It's been a little bit, so we apologize for that, but we are back here to give you some recruiting updates because Tennessee has had a lot happen on the recruiting trail. I am Nathaniel Rutherford, the managing editor of RockyTopInsider.com, and again with us for the special guest treatment, we have Brandon Martin of VR2, the newest members of the Sports Illustrated family. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Nathaniel, always good to be on. Fun to get back in here. Nice to have some actual sports news and real recruiting news to talk about.
Yeah, there is actually quite a bit for Tennessee since we last did a recruiting podcast. Not only did Tennessee get a commitment today from Roc Taylor, who that's one of the reasons we want to get on here, because Tennessee did just get another commitment today. But since last time we did a recruiting podcast, Tennessee also picked up commitments from in-state wide receiver Walker Merrill from Brentwood and North Carolina running back Jalen Wright, and we'll touch on both those kids here in a second too. But Brandon, Tennessee has a lot of recruiting momentum, not only just in the but we'll talk about this in a second too. But Tennessee they're in on some very highly rated prospects, and a lot of recruits over the past week and a half or so have had Tennessee in their list of top teams and their list of finalists. So we'll touch on that, just kind of despite this kind of unprecedented kind of break in recruiting with all the COVID-19 outbreak and stuff. And actually, I think the last time we spoke, I think had just kind of happened, and that was in the early phases of that that all going on. So it's been a while, and life has changed quite a bit over the last 3 or 4 weeks or so. But we'll talk about all that here in a second. But I do want to go ahead and bring up Tennessee's latest commitment in Roc Taylor. Brandon, I know you're probably going to echo my sentiments here. Just from watching his film, it's I wouldn't say a joke, but it's definitely something that I think Vol fans say it a lot, or Vol fans hear it a lot with some of the recruits that Tennessee gets under Jeremy Pruitt and stuff about them being, quote unquote, diamonds in the rough, or these guys who are sleeper prospects. But when I look at Roc Taylor's film and what he does, and the fact that he's kind of on the borderline of being a 4-star prospect as it is anyway. I mean, he's a 447 overall. If camps and stuff were going on, I truly think he would be getting a lot more attention and would be blowing up more than he already was, because he had a strong junior season, which we'll talk about here more in a second. But this kid, I think, even more than Walker Merrill, even more than Jalen Wright, even more than Edwin White, even more than some of these kids at Tennessee, maybe even Isaac Washington, who Tennessee already has committed, who are 3-star kids. If he gets to do any sort of camps, or as long as the high school season isn't interrupted and he can still have a senior year, I think Roc Taylor is destined to be a 4-star. This kid is, I talked about it in my impact report on RockyTopInsider.com. He's a little bit of a Juwan Jennings clone. We talked, I think you and I both talked a little bit about Merrill having a little bit of that dog in him, like Jennings. But Taylor's built like Jennings, 6'4", 210, somewhere around there. He can catch the ball. If it's within 4 or 5 feet of him, he's going to go up there and snag it. He plays very physically. He blocks downfield really well as a blocker on the outside as a receiver. I really, really like this kid. I think Tennessee I think they went in Alabama and absolutely stole away a very talented recruit.
What we've seen from Jeremy Pruitt since he's got Tennessee, and I really want to talk about last year's class when you look at it. We've mentioned this before. Early in the recruiting cycle, he and his staff like to rely on their ability to evaluate talent. They like to rely on their ability to look at film and determine how a kid fits. And they wind up offering and usually getting commitments from a lot of guys who are in that mid 3-star range. And then by the time National Signing Day rolls around, most of them are 4-stars.
Yep.
They did that last time, and I think they're doing it again now. That list of guys you just rattled off to start this thing are all candidates for that. And Taylor is a guy Tennessee has wanted to go into Alabama. They have wanted to be more successful there. They've wanted to pull players. Taylor's a good one. He is a big wide receiver. I think he's a bit of a deep ball specialist.
Yeah.
He shows better speed than you think. He's able to get behind corners. He's able to get behind safeties. And a 50-50 ball with him is not a 50-50 ball. It's more like a 70-30 ball. Mm-hmm. He's big. He's a very good basketball player down at Oxford as well. And you see that when he goes up for those jump balls. He always gets his body in position. He boxes another man out. He goes up. He high points the ball. And you talked about that catch radius, and part of the reason he has that is he has those long arms and natural hands. He doesn't let a ball run in on him. He doesn't let it get to him. He reaches out, grabs it out of the air, and goes. And when you're high pointing the ball like that, that's another foot that your arms are able to go up to grab that ball. I think he's special. I'm not sure what he is. I think Tennessee. I know Tennessee's going to look at him as a wide receiver. I think he's a guy who could potentially put on a little weight and be kind of that flex tight end they need too. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him because they have got pretty good receiver class already put together. I'm not sure how many they're going to take there without somebody moving to defense or somebody playing tight end because they got to get. I think they have to get at least 2 tight ends this class.
Yeah, that I do wonder about that. He did have conversations with T. Martin, I think, on his last visit to Tennessee on a junior day in March, and it does, like you said, it seems like he wants to play wide receiver. It seems like most schools have recruited him as a wide receiver, but he also said, I think, in an interview with T47, where he said that he likes Tennessee's offense because they spread guys out around and kind of play in different spots. And I 100% agree with your assessment. I think Taylor's a kid who can play, and kind of like look at Deke Beckwith. He's a guy I think can play in multiple different spots. They both have kind of that similar frame of 6'3", 6'4", 210, 215, and obviously I think D's added on some more weight. I think he is actually destined to be a tight end at some point, but he's starting out as a receiver, and I think Roc Taylor will probably do the same. But man, he just had an absolute just explosive junior season. He had 71 catches, 1,700 yards, 17 touchdowns, and a lot of sevens in there. But he was a first team All-State selection. Helped lead Oxford High School to the state title game in 6A down there in Alabama. So he's not doing this against in the little small 1 or 2A. He's in it 6A, which is that's a pretty big classification. And Alabama is, I'd say, they're right on par with, not a little better as far as depth-wise, as far as the talent in the state of Tennessee. They're pretty on par with each other as far as a number of 3 or 4 star recruits usually have at any given cycle. Alabama, most of the time the top 10, 15 kids from that state go to Alabama or to Auburn. Tennessee already, though, they've gone in. They got Jordan Mosley. We talked about this, I think, last week we did a podcast. Jordan Mosley out of Mobile. They have Roc Taylor at Oxford. They are targeting several kids in the state of Alabama. Dylan Brooks, obviously, the other big one. Jeremiah Williams, who just included Tennessee in his list of top teams recently. Tennessee is really, really. I think they even made Jalen White. I can't remember if that's what I'm thinking of. They made a kind of a move on a running back from there, but Tennessee also, just like with receiver, wonder how many running backs they're going to take in this class. But you also have Trinity Bell, who's an athlete, kind of tight end target, 6'7", 255, 260, somewhere around there, from Albertville. Tennessee's really, really, and they also got Edwin White, forgot about that, out of Mobile as well. I forgot he was in Alabama. Jay Jones out of Alabama, down in Demopolis. So Tennessee is, there are 2 states that Tennessee hasn't really hit hard in the past few years that they're hitting really hard this cycle, and that is Alabama and Maryland. Tennessee hasn't gotten a kid from Maryland yet, but it seems like half the kids in the top 10 or 15 of the recruits in Maryland have Tennessee, in their top schools. We'll touch on that here in a second. But Brandon, I really think Roc Taylor has a really high ceiling. I wish all this COVID-19 stuff wasn't happening for a multitude of reasons, but I definitely wish for him, because I think if he had been able to go to camps and stuff this summer, he's a kid who would blow up. You saw him get an offer from Tennessee after the end of his junior season. I think on November 30th is when Tennessee offered him. Since then, he added offers from Florida, from Kansas State, from Kansas, from Georgia Tech, there's another Power 5 school he got an offer from. So he's a kid who just was having a good junior season, picked up offers during his season from South Carolina and Arkansas, and then Tennessee offered him afterwards. That he was getting interest from Auburn as well before all the coronavirus stuff happened and all the visit stuff got canceled. I really like him, but like you said, Tennessee already has 4-star Jordan Mosley. We'll talk about Walker Merrill here in a second. Now they have Taylor, who projects as a receiver. They also, Brandon, they're in on Dante Thornton out of Maryland, who's one of the top receivers in this class. We also have Julian Nixon, who seems like he is very much leaning towards Tennessee, and it very much seems like it's a matter of when, not if, he's going to commit to Tennessee at this point. Those are 2 other guys who are receivers. How many receivers do you think Tennessee takes in this class? Because we looked at the last cycle in the 2020 class and thought, that would be a very receiver-heavy class for Tennessee, and it kind of was, but it didn't end up turning out to be, I think, quite as heavy on receiver as we all kind of thought it was going to be. Does that happen in this class? We see Tennessee take 4, maybe even 5 wideouts in this class?
I didn't think it was going to be that many, but it sure looks like they're working that way. I think Mosley is a guy who could play defense. If the Vols wanted him to, that's a guy whom you might look to move. We've wondered about running back. We wondered about running back and wide receiver. Elijah Howard from Baylor that's committed is a dynamic athlete, but he has gotten looks at running back. He's a guy that can help you in the slot at receiver. He's a guy that can also help you at defensive back. Maybe he moves there, although I think he's just too valuable with the ball in his hands. He's too dynamic when he has the ball to take off offense, I think. Walker Merrill is a pure wide receiver. I think he's ready to go, ready to plug and play. Taylor is a guy that could play tight end, could play wide receiver. I think that maybe he gives you the versatility there to help whichever group you end up needing him for, and that's a useful player to have. Julian Nixon's, like you said, it seems like it's just any day with him. And Nixon's another guy you might have in that could be a tight end conversation. He and Taylor are both guys I think Tennessee could develop whichever way they wanted.
Yeah, at 6'3", 230, that's a good point.
And so those are two guys to look at that maybe could go either way. Another guy that Tennessee is in good position with, and that Tennessee has been interested in for a long time, is Deion Colzie down at Athens Academy. Mm-hmm. Colzie had been committed to Notre Dame. He came off that Notre Dame commitment. Teammates and is close with Laneith Whitehead that signed with Tennessee in the 2020 class. Tennessee was recruiting him hard when we went down there to see him, and you want to talk about a receiver who can do everything. Man, 6'4", speed, hops, hands, the works. Runs good routes. I mean, Tennessee is in a position where they're going to get some receivers if that's what they want, and if they want to take 4 or 5 this class, it looks like you're not going to have to squint real hard to find it.
No, I mean, you look at the last class, and they did, I think, a phenomenal job of closing on that wide receiver class, especially. But you already had Jalen Hyatt in the boat for a long time. And he committed. I can't remember when he committed, but he committed and stayed committed for a while. But then you go on National Signing Day, and you go out and add not Jimmy Callaway. He'd been committed for a while too. But Jimmy Callaway's a 4-star. He's a guy who rose up the rankings as the season went along. But you go out and add DeMarcus Beckwith, as we said, who kind of will play tight end, will play receiver, will play kind of, we'll see, but he'll start receiver. Malachi Wyman was obviously the big one who could play both receiver and basketball potentially for Tennessee. And look at those 4 right there. That's a strong 4 guys in the receiving corps. But Tennessee had hopes last recruiting cycle of as good as those guys are, and I think that's still a very solid and one of the better receiver hauls Tennessee's had in a while. On the recruiting trail, but you look at kind of the hopes they'd had in that class of Raheem Jarrett and some of these other guys that they were looking at receiver before the season started, and it fell a little bit short, obviously, of what I think they were hoping to have accomplished. But it's still a very good haul, and they could just follow it up with yet another. I mean, seemingly just as strong, if not stronger, class this time, because you already have 1 4-star. I think Merrill and Taylor at some point will both become 4-stars. Merrill's right there, like he's knocking on the door of becoming a 4-star. He's the number 371 overall prospect in the composite rankings. I mean, he's a good like 30-40 spots away from becoming a 4-star. So he's right there on the door. Taylor's not too far. It's not too far-fetched to think he will move up to a 4-star, especially looking at his film. It would surprise me unless he has some kind of injury or the camp evals and stuff just don't happen this year because of all the coronavirus stuff. It really would surprise me if he doesn't move up to that ranking at some point. But then you look at Julian Nixon's a 4-star. You look at Thornton's a 4-star. I think Tennessee's just in on a lot of highly ranked kids, and obviously star ratings don't mean everything. But this as you said, we weren't anticipating necessarily that Tennessee would go ahead and get as big, if not bigger, of a receiver class than last cycle, but hey, it turned out that way. Speaking of the receivers, let's go ahead and talk a little bit here, Brandon, about the other 2 commitments since last time we spoke with Walker Merrill and Jalen Wright. I think particularly with Wright, he's a guy who I think he is a sleeper, diamond in the rough, wherever you want to word it, but I don't expect him to jump up a huge amount necessarily because I love his film. He is a fast kid. This kid is a premier athlete, a really good track athlete. He had one of the fastest, he still does actually have one of the fastest times in high school in the 2020, I guess, indoor track and outdoor track time as far as what he could do on the, I think, the 55 or 60 meter, and his 200 meters is also really fast. His 100 meters is also really fast. He's just a fast kid. I like his playmaking ability. He's a guy who I don't think will be an every down type of back. I think he's going to be a kid who, I think he's not just going to be just a third down back, but I think he's going to be a guy who can play multiple roles on your offense. But I like his ceiling. I think Elijah Howard has a little bit higher of a ceiling just as an overall athlete, but I really like what Wright brings to the table, and he brings that speed that Tennessee's been missing in the running back room really for a while now, it feels like. And then you look at Walker Merrill, and Brandon, I know you're very high on him, and I'll let you kind of handle that conversation more. But Merrill's a guy who I already liked him. I liked him because of what you said about him, from what you've seen from him at camps and stuff. But then I heard Jason Swain, who knows a thing or two about playing receiver at Tennessee, talk about watching his film and watching how smooth he is coming out of breaks and how much he really enjoys the film of Walker Merrill and how he thinks he should be a 4-star too. And if Swain thinks it, I'm pretty inclined to think that receiver has some talent because, I trust his eye for receiving talent, especially when it comes to guys coming at Tennessee. So I think both those guys are really good pickups. I think Merrill especially is a good pickup. And I agree with you. I think he's a kid who can come in and probably play immediately as a freshman. I don't know how much he'll play, but I think he definitely has a role as a freshman when he comes into Tennessee.
Walker Merrill could play. Walker Merrill would fight for an opportunity to play at Tennessee this fall. I've said that before, but he is 100% college ready right now. Physically, mentally, the state of his game, he's ready. He's ready to go. He has that. He has everything you want on the receiver. He can play in the slot. He can play outside. He runs fantastic routes. He's big. He's strong. He's tough to tackle. He has good enough top end speed to take the top off of defense. He has great hands. You name it, he has it. This is a kid that I think is going to surprise people when he gets on campus. If you have watched him play or you have watched him work, there's something different about him. I've watched him. I've watched a lot of his film, and I've watched him in a lot of these camps and 7-on-7s. I've seen him go against really top flight corners. I've seen him work against really elite corners, and he gets open with his route running. He gets open with his speed and his route running. And that's probably not the biggest part of his game. As good as his route running, and he's a very, very strong receiver, very difficult guy to bring down once he catches the ball. And he uses that strength well, and that's not something that comes into the 7-on-7 thing as much. So he was kind of doing this against elite defensive backs without his fastball, and they still can't cover him. As far as Wright goes, the guy that Jalen Wright reminds me of is the guy that went and recruited him. He reminds me of Jay Graham. When Jay Graham came to Tennessee,
you're not the first person I've actually heard or seen say that. I think it's someone else on Twitter I saw compared him to Jay Graham.
He looks like Graham did when he came to Tennessee. They have a similar build. They have the same running style. It's that same lean. They both have just blazing explosive speed. And I think people don't always understand what we're talking about when we say elite speed. So to put it in perspective, Jalen Wright was the national under-18 champion in the 55-meter dash. The national champion.
Yeah, if you think Jalen Hyatt's fast, I mean, this kid actually had a faster time than what Jalen Hyatt did as far as stuff like that goes. I think Hyatt might be. I don't know. That's actually a good question. I don't know which one would be faster, him or Hyatt. That's a good question, I think.
And Hyatt can burn. Hyatt can absolutely burn. But here's the difference on Wright. When you look at Wright, when you watch his track film and you watch some of these finals and you get to those national finals, you have a whole bunch of guys out there running track, and then there's this one kid who takes up his entire lane. It's like, oh, he must play football too. And it's right. Like, one of these things is not like the others. You don't find guys with his build, with his kind of speed often. And he'll run between the tackles. He's not your, again, and I keep coming back to this comparison, it's like Jay Graham was. he's not always looking to turn the corner. He's not always looking for the tall sweep or to bounce something outside. If that hole in the middle opens up, he's going to put his foot in the ground, and before defenses know it, he's in the second level pushing for the third. And you're trying to get turned to get an angle on him because you won't catch him in a straight race. I think he could be another sleeper on this Tennessee class. We keep looking at these guys, and I know you're like me. You have a lot of fans that talk about 3-star this and 3-star that. I watch a lot of film and I watch a lot of guys play. These guys Tennessee has been landing. Guys have got really good film, really, really good film. Mm-hmm. I think Wright's a big sleeper. It honestly, sincerely wouldn't surprise me to see Walker Merrill be a 4-star. He already has been, and I don't really understand why he dropped. But I expect Merrill to be a 4-star. If Taylor gets to play at all this year, he'll get to the 4-star level. Mosley is a 4-star. I would not be surprised to see Wright hit that.
I think Howard potentially could too, just from how explosive he is as an athlete.
Look, people can tell me whatever they want to about Elijah Howard. If you can cover him, you can tell me you can rank him whatever you want to.
That kid is so good, especially if he has a 2 feet of space, he's taking all that 2 feet and he's gone. I mean, you cannot give him any room to run.
You can put him in a phone booth and not hit him. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's 4.3 speed fast, and he's quicker than he is fast. I mean, there are not a lot of guys that we saw last season take Keyshawn Lawrence out of his shoes. Yeah. Elijah Howard got him. Elijah Howard got him in the open field and left Keyshawn in the dirt and went on to score. And we all know how good Lawrence is. Elijah Howard's done this to everybody. And Howard, great hands, I think could help you as a receiver, all-purpose back, great speed, will run between the tackles. If you've watched his film and watched the just breathtaking stuff he's able to do, I don't understand how he's rated as low as he is.
Yeah, he did get recently, I guess, in kind of 247 Sports' last update. I think they're due for one a little bit later this month, but he did get bumped up to where he's right on that cusp of being a 4-star. They stopped, for whatever reason, they've stopped listing the recruits' rankings outside of the top 247 on their own. They still have it on the composite, but outside of their own, they've stopped doing it outside the 247. But he's got an 89 rating, which is right there on that border of being a 3 or 4-star, and he's the number 27 running back in the country, and he's the number 9 prospect in the state of Tennessee. And the guy ahead of him, number 8, Adonai Mitchell, is another one who's is another one who's on Tennessee's radar, and we'll kind of talk about him, I'm sure, in a future podcast and stuff. But Brandon, to kind of transition here, just a couple more topics I want us to discuss. This one kind of briefly here. As I mentioned earlier, Tennessee has, for this being a extended dead period now through May 31st, Tennessee has a lot of momentum, not just, like I said, with the recruits, but you look at 4-star linebacker Greg Penn III. You look at 4-star defensive ends Elijah Judy. You look at 5-star cornerback, the number 1 cornerback in the country, in Tony Grimes. 5-star outside linebacker Terrence Lewis. 4-star defenders Jeremiah Williams and Javon Dumas Johnson. Marcus Bradley, a 4-star defensive tackle. 2 4-star quarterbacks in Christian Veilleux, and then Caden Salter, who I was lucky enough to interview and talk about, why he put Tennessee in his top list. Dante Thornton, I mentioned earlier, Aaron Willis, 4 stars. I mean, Tennessee, all of these guys I just mentioned, they're in the top, whatever, 10, 5, 6, 8, 12. They're in the top list out of all of those kids. And I don't know if those guys necessarily, any of those who I just mentioned, are going to commit anytime soon. In fact, I know, a handful of them aren't going to commit anytime soon because a few of them have, dates set in December or January of when they're going to commit. But Brandon, there's a lot of momentum here. Do we think we see Tennessee get another commit in the next week? And if so, who? Because I think one guy we mentioned earlier in this conversation about receivers, I think Tennessee could potentially see him commit, and I think there's a chance you see someone else commit sometime soon.
I'm surprised Julian Nixon has not committed already. The 4-star receiver from down in Roswell, Georgia at Centennial High School. We've talked about him a little bit, but I'm surprised Nixon hasn't already committed. He is on Twitter actively recruiting other players to Tennessee. He is going back and forth with Tennessee's current roster and players. He's going back and forth with other guys in the class. I'm just waiting on that one because it really seems like it's a done deal and this is where he wants to be. We'll see on a few of these other guys. Tennessee's in a position with a lot of these guys. It's something we talked about when Jeremy Pruitt first got here and a few other times. Tennessee has been making the cut of the top 4 or 5 for some really good players and then just not usually getting picked. Well, then 2019, we saw him land a couple in Darnell Wright and Henry To'oTo'o. Wanya Morris was another really good example of that. But we saw him get Wright and To'oTo'o on signing day.
Yeah.
Yeah, Crouch as well. Last year, we saw Tennessee, a few more of these higher-end prospects are looking at UT. They're considering them. I think Tennessee was in a position to land a few of those guys until they sort of face-planted out of the gate. And we've talked at length about that, how that really kneecapped a lot of their recruiting last year. But they still wound up with a top 10 class. They still landed some really, really outstanding football players in spite of that terrible start. This year, you're seeing them again. This is the most really elite players. Tennessee has been in the top 4, 5, 8, whatever for in a long time. They're really on the mind of a lot of elite players from all across the country. Do I think they're going to get all of them? Absolutely not. But every time you make that final 4, every time you make that final 5 or 6 or 7, the odds go up. Your odds bump up. You've got a better chance. And so out of all those guys you just rattled off, I think Tennessee's going to get 2 or 3 of them. I think that's – you don't really know who it is yet. You've got a lot of things to shake out. It's a long season. But if Tennessee comes out and does kind of what they're expected to this year, I think it's reasonable to think Tennessee could pull a couple, maybe 3 of those guys. I know Velu's very high on Tennessee. Salter, when you talk to him, is high on Tennessee. A lot of these defensive guys are high on Tennessee. And then we're not even talking about guys like Dylan Brooks that I think Tennessee's probably the front runner for, and the Vols are also working on Peyton Page.
Yep.
So, I mean, Tennessee's in the discussion and on the mind of a lot of these players. I think they're going to have a chance to land a lot of these guys, and this is something else this staff, I don't think, does on accident. We saw it last year. We're seeing it again this year. By October last year, really after Tennessee landed the Whitehaven guys, from that point on, Tennessee was big game hunting.
Yeah.
They were looking for the elite players. They were looking for the really high-end guys because it started with that bunch of guys from Whitehaven. They pulled in 3 4-star defenders, and then they were looking for the big guys. And all of a sudden, you started looking at the class going, man, this is a pretty solid class. They just need to get the top end filled out. And as the season went on, those guys that you kind of had questions about kept improving. They kept rising, kept going up. By the time National Signing Day got here, a whole lot of them were 4 stars, and a couple of the guys that were 3 stars, really 2 of them were only 3 stars because of the positions they played. They were interior linemen. Mm-hmm. James Robinson and Javonte Spraggins were as good as you're going to find at their positions. And I think you're kind of seeing Tennessee build that same way this year. They're getting a really solid core right now that they believe in, and guys they believe that are going to develop, are going to grow this year, are going to continue to rise. They trust what they're doing because Tennessee has a staff full of football guys and recruiters. We've talked a lot. That's one of the strengths of this staff is their ability to evaluate.
Yep.
You're seeing that solid core, and now as we're moving toward the season, Tennessee's in the discussion for these elite guys. Well, the Vols are going to be able to dedicate more time to them because the meat and potatoes of that class are already put together. Now you're able to go after the really high-end guys and focus a lot more time and effort on them. I think Tennessee's going to surprise some people if they start, especially if they start strong. If they were to upset Oklahoma or Florida, they're going to land a couple of those elite guys, and they're going to get them early.
Yeah, if you pull it up so early, I think last we talked about that on the podcast. If Tennessee can go out and to get an early victory over one of those top 4 teams, that'll really help boost this class and kind of boost Tennessee's standing. But the whole conversation about whether or not this season's going to happen, that's a totally different thing. We'll have, I'm sure, another day. We've been asked about that on the mailbag on RTI, and I'm sure you guys have been asked about that quite a bit too. That's obviously a different conversation for a different day. But talking about Julian Nixon here, I just went through his tweets as you were talking, Brandon, and since April 1st, so hopefully this isn't just some long like April Fool's Day prank, but since April 1st he has tweeted or retweeted something to do with Tennessee football 8 different times since April 1st. I think there's only been one tweet and mixed in between all those that didn't have something to do with Tennessee. So he's asked Tennessee to give attention to Cody Brown, one of their top running back targets, to give attention to Kamara Wilcoxon, who decommitted from Florida and is another guy Tennessee's been pursuing. So you look back from April 1st through now, and there's been one of the 9 tweets that he's tweeted out that didn't have something to do with Tennessee. The rest of them have been retweets of Tennessee stuff, or him talking about Tennessee, or him trying to get Tennessee fans to give other recruits some love. So like you said, I'm kind of surprised he hasn't already committed. I hope he's not just one of those guys that's kind of stringing Tennessee along and using this to get likes and retweets and attention and stuff. But he's a legit baller, and I think it's basically a matter of when, not if, for him. But Brandon, the last thing I wanted to bring up here on this episode of the RTI podcast, and again, I appreciate you joining me here, is you want to talk about, and I think it's worth talking about, Chase Bishop, a guy who just walked on to Tennessee. And normally we don't talk about walk-ons and recruiting, or at least a ton, unless it's like a local kid who has a good story. This kid is kind of local. He's an in-state guy. He played over Independence in Tennessee. But Brandon, this guy actually had like a pretty good offer list, like an actual legit scholarship offers from some pretty interesting schools. He was kind of a low 3-star prospect, but watching his film, he moves very well. He's a very speedy guy, and it seems like he is going to walk on at Tennessee. Brandon, you and I both are talking before we hit record here. We're both pretty surprised that Tennessee is able to get this kind of caliber of athlete to walk on at Tennessee. He seems like a pretty legit athlete.
I've watched a fair amount of his tape. I keep going over it. I kind of did our first write-up on him. And so Chase plays at Independence High School. It's in Thompson Station, Tennessee, so it's near Nashville. If the name Bishop rings a bell to folks in Tennessee, it's because his dad is Blaine Bishop, that played for the Tennessee Titans for so long, was a 4-time Pro Bowler in the NFL as a safety. Chase is a seriously legit athlete. I mean, we're talking sub 4.4 speed. I mean, he can run. He had a lot of good offers. We're talking, he had a late offer from Michigan. Michigan offered him, I think, the week before National Signing Day. And you know as well as I do, you don't start. And he's a 2020 kid, by the way. So he's a kid who will be on the roster this fall. So you know as well as I do, you don't offer kids that late in the cycle unless you're interested in bringing them in. Mm-hmm. And so he picked up a Michigan offer late January. He also had offers from Virginia Tech. He had offers from Purdue, Northwestern, from Missouri, from Vanderbilt. He had a Memphis offer, Tulane, and his dad's alma mater at Ball State. So, I mean, he has you're talking, that's several Power 5 offers here. 2 of them are SEC offers from teams you're going to play every year. And he kind of decided out of the blue to come to Tennessee. And when he announced it, he even said surprise, because I don't think anybody saw him going to Tennessee. Nathaniel, the more of this kid's tape I watch, I think Tennessee stole one. I mean, I think Tennessee has really stolen a good football player. Not just as a walk-on, but I think Tennessee stole a really good player. This is a mid-range 3-star kid. He has a good offer list. He had Power 5 teams, multiple ones interested. He has good speed. At Independence, he played both sides of the ball. I think his tape as a wide receiver is a little better, but the routes he was asked to run were very, very basic, but they were rock solid for what he needed to do. Very, very good fundamentally, uses his speed well. On defense, he's got some technique to work on, but really the only thing that I see in him that needs the work is the technique. And between a dad who was a 4-time Pro Bowler in the NFL and now going to play for Jeremy Pruitt and Derek Ansley, who are two of the best defensive back coaches and developers of talent, teachers of technique in the country, I think this is a guy that the Vols are going to be able to develop. I don't think he's going to play this year. Nothing like that. I don't think he's going to play in the 2020 season. I think there's probably a good chance that he doesn't play a whole lot in 2021 unless it's on special teams or returning kicks, because he's also a fantastic kick returner. But this is a guy that by the time he starts hitting that redshirt sophomore year, this is a kid that I expect to be in the discussion of, man, he might start at corner some. He's 5'11", about 190. He's tough. He'll come up and hit you. He has the speed to run with anybody. He reminds me a lot of another guy that we saw Tennessee pick up really, really late, who was an offense-defense guy whose tape was probably a little better on offense, and Tennessee decided to play on defense. That's Bryce Thompson. There's a lot of similarities in build. There's a lot of similarities in their game. There's similarities in the way that Tennessee got them both to come in. Now, obviously, Thompson was on scholarship. I wouldn't be stunned if Bishop was on scholarship. If Tennessee got him to walk on, that is staggering. I do think he's going to be a corner at Tennessee because he played corner at the Blue-Gray All-American game. I think that was a bit of an indication of what he wanted to do and what some schools were looking at him for. So I think that was a big, big, big pull for Tennessee, because you don't get an athlete like that to walk on. I mean, you just don't. Not many guys that are that good and have offer lists like that are going to walk on even in state, even if they're close. And I think he's a kid who can make some noise for Tennessee. I really do. I think he is a kid that Tennessee has stolen from people. And we talk about when a kid normally signs this late, there's usually some kind of issue or some kind of problem. The first thing we always jump to is grades. Well, you see the Vanderbilt offer, the Michigan offer, and the Northwestern offer. Grades are not a problem. There's no history of being in trouble off the field. There's no baggage that seems to be off there. I would love to talk with Chase and ask him why he made the decisions that he made and why he went the way that he did. But I think he's a guy who can actually really help Tennessee. This is a better player that really flew under the radar for the Vols that I think they have added.
I like him a lot, and to go back to his dad, Blaine. Doesn't Blaine work for 104.5 over Nashville?
Yeah, Blaine is on the radio in Nashville. Yeah. I don't remember exactly who he's with
I was anymore. Looking it up. I think he's over at the Wake Up Zone, like their first show on 104.5. I don't listen to a ton of national radio. I was like, I'm pretty sure he does some kind of radio stuff. So yeah, his dad does work over in Nashville. And when you and I were talking before we hit record here, and you mentioned that Chase played cornerback at the Blue-Gray game, I thought, all right, that's exactly why what he's going to do at Tennessee. He's not going to play receiver, I don't think. I think he's going to be a kid that has good ball skills on the offensive side of the ball, but the fact that he played defense in that game and the fact that he has any kind of ceiling on defense, I 100% expect to see him on defense at Tennessee, because we've seen if Jeremy Pruitt can get his hands on a kid who plays on offense but also plays defense and has some good tools and skills to play on defense, man, Pruitt and Ansley love getting guys in the secondary, or even at linebacker, but definitely guys in the secondary who have ball skills, who are used to playing running back or receiver on offense, and who have good enough talent to read offenses and guard guys. And I fully expect Chase at this point. When you told me that, I fully expect Chase to move the defensive side of the ball once he gets to Tennessee, or I guess he is technically at Tennessee already, but I fully expect him to move to Tennessee. His dad played at Ball State. He took an official visit to Ball State. And actually, I think his dad's actually a Hall of Famer at Ball State, because he was such a good player. Obviously, like you said, went on to be a 4-time Pro Bowler in the NFL. But I think he's an exciting development. I think there's a lot of positivity around Tennessee football right now. That's why obviously fans want the season to go anyway. Even if Tennessee was looking like they're going to be 5-7 this year, Vol fans would still rather there be a football season than not. So that's why there's a lot of hope and optimism that this season will get played. because Vol fans obviously love football, but also this team looks like they could be, not competing for a national championship, but a lot better than what we've seen over the last, 3-4 years of Tennessee football. But Brandon, I again appreciate you coming on here. Let all of our listeners here know what you'll have come down the wire at VR2, what you currently have on the site too.
If you want to look up any of our work, whatever we're doing, we're at si.com/college/Tennessee. We're kind of all over the place right now. We're tracking down recruiting interviews with guys that have recently committed. We're trying to stay ahead of the game. We're building relationships with a lot of these 2022 kids. We're going to try to get you some names to know in that. Matter of fact, as soon as we get done here, I've got an interview with a young man that's we're going to be putting up soon. Just recently, I was able to do an interview with one of the best 7-on-7 coaches in the country. A guy by the name of James Williams runs PPA out in Memphis. They have got a ton of talent on that team. Really gave a great interview and insight as to why he got into this, the value of 7-on-7. Got a chance to list off a lot of his players, a lot of talent at those camps. And then we're trying to cover the team as best we can. We're just really, really ready for sports to come back, just like everybody else is. But come over, check us out. We have an instant reaction video up on Roc Taylor. We have our analysis piece up on him. We're trying to stay on top of these breaking commitments. We're expecting at least one or two in the next few days. So give us a follow. Stay close. There should be more news breaking, real sports news.
That's nice. It's nice to actually have a lot of recruiting stuff to talk about, and like you said, some real sports news. But definitely give them a follow. Definitely check them out. Like I said, last podcast I had Brandon on. Very excited, very happy for them to be joining the SI Now team over at Sports Illustrated. They do a lot of great work at VR2, and you guys, if you don't already follow them, which I'm assuming most of you listening probably do, you should definitely go follow them at _VR2_ on Twitter, and they're at VR2 on Facebook and Instagram as well. We're Rocky Top Insider on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Mr_Rutherford. We appreciate all of you tuning in to this episode. We should hopefully be back sooner rather than later. Signing off for Brandon, I am Nathaniel. Thank you all for listening. This has been another episode of the RTI Recruiting Podcast.